Well, tonight is a special night because, as I've said before, I think the best feature of the course are our guest speakers. They bring a huge amount of expertise to us, and we are very fortunate to have another guest speaker here this evening. Tonight we have Jennifer Labin of Terp Associates. And Terp Associates, what Jen does there is that's her company. She leads a team and she seeks to grow talent that ignites potential. She specializes in implementing high impact and high value mentoring solutions. She has a background in developing, facilitating content leadership skills. She's helped individuals achieve greater potential through training, workshops, long-term development programs, online media, social media, presentations, and individual development plans. Jen is an author. She's an author of Mentoring Programs That Work, a unique approach to creating sustainable and scalable solutions. She also wrote Real World Training Design, a quick visual guide for creating exceptional results with tight budgets and timelines. And we've all had those, right? Jen has been published to the ASTD Handbook, second edition, the Pfeiffer Annual Consulting Journal, 101 Ways to Make Training Active, How to Write Terrific Training Materials, and ASTD Trainer's Toolkit. She's presented at ASTD conferences. And the thing that I like most about her, I like a lot of things, but she's also an alumni of our program. She is one of our proud graduates, and we're happy to have her here tonight. So, Jen, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate the invitation. I'm excited to talk to you all tonight.
Well, good. I am going to turn it over to you, if I
All
can do
right.
that. You should get like a little dialogue box that says you're being asked to be the presenter.
Okay, and I'm gonna just share my PowerPoint. Can everybody see my PowerPoint?
I can, yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, I can see it.
Guy standing on top of a mountaintop, right?
Yeah, we're so yes. Um, I had a graphic designer actually design this for me, but one of my clients is they're a presentation design firm. And one of the things that you're not ever supposed to use is an image of a guy standing on top of a mountaintop. So I don't ever show them this branded template because I would get in trouble with my client. Hi everyone. Thanks for the intro, Greg. My name is Jenn Labin. And yes, Terp Associates is the company I started 8 years ago, actually a little longer than that now. And my goal for tonight is to talk to you about mentoring programs that work. I have a bunch of content that I pulled together to share with you, but also since I remember taking this course and being in the program, I'm also open to wherever the conversation is going to go as well. So happy to answer any questions sort of outside of mentoring as well. I've been in the industry for very nearly 20 years now. Clearly, I started when I was 10, and that's a joke. I'm
That's
hoping
funny.
everyone's on mute. So if there's anything as well, like we're not just limited to mentoring, but here's where I'd like to start because I think there's only a few people live on the line tonight. I want to start with this is an activity that I do pretty much almost every time I talk about mentoring. And first, I am curious to have you reflect on the best mentoring experience you've ever had. And this doesn't have to be someone who formally mentored you in a formal mentoring program, but it could be a mentor, kind of an informal mentor like a coach or your first boss or something like that. So I would love to hear how you would finish this sentence. The best mentor I ever had, what? And I can't see the names to call on. Here we go. Who would like to share their response to this?
Hi, this is Rebecca Griffin.
Hi, Rebecca.
I would say that the best mentor I ever had supplied me with all the tools and resources that I needed to complete my job.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I like that. So the mentor kind of enabled you to do your job well, to be successful. I love that you called out these like tools and resources, right? We know that really great mentors do provide tools and resources. And that's part of their job, but they didn't make you successful, right? Like you had the choice about what to do with those tools and resources. You were only successful because you also had a big part to play in that. So thank you for sharing that. Who else?
I'll go next. This is Melody Ray. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Melody. Thanks.
Sorry. So I would say that the best mentor I ever had told me it was okay to fail and what to do when that happened.
Absolutely. Thank you, Melody. Yeah, that's another important one. So setting up this idea that, well, okay, one of the things I like to talk about is this idea of a power dynamic. In a lot of one-on-one mentoring relationships, we go into these relationships, sometimes, often, there's a power dynamic that we have to be aware of. The mentor is someone who has all this experience or a bunch of letters behind their name, or they've done the thing that we want to do, whatever it might be. And that makes the mentee in that relationship, may make them feel a little intimidated or overwhelmed or what have you. So the mentor sharing that permission to fail, actually encouraging that we fail fast and we recover fast, is also going to be key for mentees in those relationships, learners in those relationships, to feel comfortable knowing that not that there's a safety net there, but that there's a purpose behind failing. That's great, Melody. Who else?
This is Rebecca Dongera, and I can go next.
Great, Rebecca.
So the best mentor I ever had gave me some suggestions about how to network, and then reminded me that the worst case scenario is I'm told no, and to move forward by learning from that experience. So it helped me overcome some fear and anxiety about approaching people, and to really bring home the fact that, you know, it's okay to have somebody say no, and you'll get over that and probably come out for the better.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I love that. One of my biggest mentors did the same thing. So the reason I wrote my first book was because she told me to write a book. She said, you have at least one book idea in there, get it out there. And I don't remember exactly when she told me that. I think I was probably 27, and I was going, who wants to hear from a 27-year-old? And I would never have written it if she didn't push me. And that's kind of the magic of hearing that you're limiting yourself from someone that you trust and respect. Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate that. Is there somebody else who'd like to share? I'll take one more. Greg, how about you?
I'll jump in. And I'm not sure if they can see the chat function. Jen, can you see the chat function?
Oh, no, I don't have chat open. I guess I should have done that. Now I see it blinking. I'm used to Zoom. Okay. I have not used GoToWebinar in a while. I apologize.
All right. Sorry for not reminding you about the chat.
No, I see it. I'm good now.
Okay. Yeah. I would say the mentor that I had, he treated me, even though I was young enough to be his son, he treated me like an equal right from the start.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, so this mutual trust, mutual respect, so key to a healthy relationship. And guess what? Not just a mentoring relationship. So perfect. Thank you, Greg. And now I see David also contributed, taught me what is generally or always expected of an ISD consultant. Nice. So kind of laying the guidelines for you there, and yeah, putting some swim lanes in, setting clear expectations, definitely something that we expect from mentors. Thank you. All right. So the reason that I like to start off this conversation, because I know we're supposed to be talking about mentoring programs, but before we talk about mentoring programs, we have to talk about the fact that mentoring programs are successful when the mentoring relationships are successful. Mentoring is in its own category when it comes to L&D because it's relationship-based learning. It's social learning. Now, this is completely different than anything else that is a hallmark of what we do in this field. And yet, it's always been treated like training. It's not training. It's relationship-based learning. It's completely different. So, so one of the things that I find it very helpful to start off with is to define some important aspects of mentoring. This is what my team calls powerful mentoring, because we believe mentoring can have a profound strategic and individual impact for organizations that use it as a tool when done correctly. So our definition of powerful mentoring is a sustained social learning relationship between two or more individuals built on mutual trust and respect. So that's a hefty phrase or sentence there. A couple of things I want to pull out from here. First of all, sustained. The word sustained, this is the primary aspect, the primary characteristic of mentoring that sets it aside from other L&D solutions like workshops or training or whatever you want to call it. I know training is a bad word in some circles, but I still use it as a shortcut. You know, e-courses, even some of the micro-learning and libraries and things like this. These are all events. Now, they might be well-designed events. They might be events that have pre-work and post-work, and so they're a little bit longer, but it's really just not the same as a mentoring relationship that lasts 6 months, 12 months longer. So sustained is the first thing. Social learning. This is something I really drive home with a lot of the people who participate in programs that we design and implement, because a really good relationship, mentoring relationship, has to have both components of social and learning. I've seen plenty of people say, well, I had a great mentor. I really enjoyed meeting with them. We would go out for coffee. They asked me about my kids. They were really charismatic. I loved hearing their stories, but there was no learning happening. And so at the end of that time period of that formal mentoring relationship, they were friends, but there was no real learning and development. And on the other side too, while the focus has to be on what are we going to work on, what's our goals, what's the learning, if there isn't a connection on some level, so what we'll loosely term a social connection, then it's unlikely that either partner or any partners in this relationship are going to feel comfortable enough to settle into that relationship and really push themselves to learn. So let me check in. First two parts of the phrase. Everybody good with that? Makes sense so far?
Makes sense.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so the virtual environment, I love facilitating virtually, but I'm kind of a needy facilitator. I'll be checking in with you pretty often to say, hey, did I lose everybody, or are you guys good? So, and then the rest are pretty intuitive. You all are professionals. I'm sure these aren't surprising, but between two or more individuals, this helps remind us that mentoring takes a lot of forms. We're going to talk about that more in a little while. It's not just one-on-one. It can be a lot of different things. And then built on mutual trust and respect. A few of you in your responses, you all you shared some of these aspects that we have to trust that they have our best interests in both directions, that we respect them in both directions. Now, some folks asked some questions about, let's see, there was a question about the difference between mentoring and coaching. And this is a really common question. Now, I think that everybody has their own take on that. I think that if you do a Google search of mentoring versus coaching and you click on the first 10 links, you'll probably get 10 different answers. The way that we consider this, first and foremost, is that mentoring is how you define the relationship. Coaching is a skill set that's used within the relationship. So a coach, someone who considers themselves a coach, think career coach, life coach, these are folks who are typically trained and experienced to use some sort of question approach or appreciative inquiry or some sort of approach that helps empower the person or people they're working with to solve their own problems. That's sort of the coaching approach. It's a great skill set. It's a fantastic skill set that can be implemented at different times during the mentoring relationship. But the difference is that during a mentoring relationship, we're not always, or the mentees in those relationships, sometimes they need someone to actually give them advice and guidance. Sometimes that coaching skill set is not the right fit for a given conversation. And so that's why I say coaching can be used within the mentoring relationship, but it's not all inclusive. Now, having said that, that's my take on it. I have built mentoring programs that we ended up calling coaching programs. And I've gone in and called people coaches that I would normally call mentors. And that's because there is one rule that overrides everything else, which is language is important, words matter. Language is important, words matter. It's one of our mantras that we live by. So we have had clients who have said, we've had really bad failures when it comes to mentoring programs in the past. Everyone's a little skittish about implementing a new mentoring program. We need to call it a coaching program. And we're like, okay, if that's what we need to be successful, then we'll use your language and we'll make it work. So while we use things like powerful mentoring, sustained social learning, mentor versus coach, we use these languages, this language and these words when we're talking amongst friends and colleagues. We will adjust our language ultimately to whatever the client needs because that is of the most importance. So before I roll on, I'm happy to answer any questions about that or hear any reactions to that whole segment there. Or you can say, nope.
I'm good.
Thank you.
It's all pretty clear at this point.
Awesome. Okay, good. So that's how we define powerful mentoring, because it is relationship-based learning. But as far as how I shifted from how I created a different approach to mentoring programs and why I did it, there's a little bit of a story behind the Axles framework, which is the framework I developed for my book. As I said, I've been in L&D for my entire career. So when I was in undergrad at UMBC, I had a professor who said, you know, I'm teaching these classes over at UMUC. I really need someone helping me. These are non-traditional students, career changers, etc. And I could really use a hand. So I started teaching adults when I was 19. So I've been in L&D for literally my entire career. I have done technical training, like, you know, everything from graphics and web design to, you know, other types of software, to sales, to leadership. I mean, I spent most of my career in leadership development. So over that time, I've had the pleasure of building several mentoring programs. And when I was internal with my last, you know, internal position before I was really in running TERP full time, I was asked to build more and more mentoring programs. And then as I was building this company, we just kept getting more work around mentoring, and this work, it just kind of built momentum. And I started to realize something really fundamental. Most practitioners that I've ever met have had the opportunity to build 1 or 2 mentoring programs over the course of an entire career. And that's not enough time to really start to identify those really unique roadblocks, obstacles, and unique benefits that come with mentoring. Like, how do we handle this thing? And so they were using the same old frameworks, ADDIE, SAM, Llama, Agile, whatever it is, whatever these practitioners were using to build training or e-learning, this is what they were using to build mentoring. And as we looked at that, part of the reason we looked at that definition of powerful mentoring before this is because so many of those aspects of relationship-based learning require a different approach. It's not event-based. It's not something that you can just plan the launch of a mentoring program and then it's all done. It takes a sustained effort. And so, so that was one big trigger, catalyst. We need a different approach. We're treating oranges like apples, right? We need a different approach. The second big catalyst is, as I was building these mentoring programs, I also started hearing from clients that this was not the first attempt at mentoring within the organization. There had been failures and flops. Things had gone poorly. And one thing that became abundantly clear is that once a mentoring program or a mentoring initiative has failed within an organization, man, those organizations have long memories. And so once you start to implement a new one, people are going, oh yeah, here we go again, flavor of the month. This one's going to fail just like the last one. And the consequence of that is that it was a total uphill battle, trying to get leadership bought into it, trying to prove the value, trying to get mentors willing to invest their time. And so for both of those reasons, I decided to develop a different approach, which is Axles, which I'm going to share with you tonight. The Axles framework just takes a different tact. Now, honestly, the Axles framework, you're going to see like the ghost of ADDIE in there. You're going to see a lot of the same components, but the intention, the direction of it is a little bit different. So without further ado, here is the Axles framework. And I know it looks so complex. You all must be just overwhelmed with it. But in all seriousness, I think some of the best things in the world are simple and straightforward. It's just that we needed to see it. And that's how I felt about this when it kind of came together for me. When I realized what the most effective mentoring programs were based on, this is what came out of that. So the Axles framework is 5 components that need to be planned out and built out before a mentoring program launches. In general, it helps for you to design these in order. So align to a purpose, design the experience, launch the program launch, evaluate for effectiveness, and support participants. You have to have a plan for all of these. Now, as I said, it helps to go in order, but this is not a linear framework, so it's possible to bounce around. As a matter of fact, in real life, we do bounce around quite a bit based on how the client works. And so what I put together for you for this evening, for the rest of our time together, is content from the course I teach for ATD on mentoring programs that work. And I'm going to go through each of these 5 components with you. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the components that are probably less familiar to people who haven't built a lot of mentoring programs. But before I get into that content, I think it would be helpful for me to know a little bit from some of you, and you're very welcome to put this into chat. I think we'll start with just a really simple 1 to 5 response, if you don't mind. Given a scale of 1 to 5, I would like to know how comfortable you feel, like how confident you feel in being able to build a mentoring program from scratch. So 1 is, this is actually the first time I've ever thought about it, and 5 is, actually I've already built several. Okay, great. Awesome. I see a couple 1s and a 3. Okay, so far I see a couple 1s and a 3. And I'll take that to mean that I can spend a little bit more time on the details. I am very open to feedback though. So as I'm going through any of these sections, if you want me to hurry up, you can just send me a note in chat and I will pay attention and know if I need to speed up or slow down. Likewise, this is your learning experience. So if you need more clarification, if you want me to spend more time on something, or if you have a question that is completely outside of what we're talking about, just throw it in the chat, let me know, and we'll roll with whatever is going to add value to you all. So the first component is align to a purpose. And this is a lot like the analysis part of Addie or the savvy start to SAM. The idea, of course, being to uncover those things that are going to decide the success of the mentoring program. So in Align to a Purpose, we ask questions about what's driving mentoring for this organization. What we don't want is for someone to say, hey, we need a mentoring program, and for us to just build one. Because then we fall into the trap that L&D has always fallen into, not always, often falls into, which is we end up being a hammer looking for a nail. We end up being a solution that has no problem. And that is what has, in the past, given L&D or talent development or whatever you want to call us, it's what has given us a bad reputation for being cost centers and for, you know, not measuring our values. So we don't want that to happen with mentoring, especially. So here's what I'd like you to do. Greg, can everyone annotate on the screen?
I'm not sure if everyone can.
Okay. Well, and actually, I don't know if it'll show up because I got to set up. Well, we'll just do it in chat again. So if you were to, if you have thought about a mentoring program for the organization you work for, or if you think that a mentoring program might be a good fit, I'm curious about what drivers you would cite. So on your screen, you'll see 12 of the most common reasons, most common purposes that organizations implement mentoring programs. So in chat, let us know which of these would be driving mentoring for your organization, or maybe your organization does have a mentoring program and you can identify what the driver is for that. It doesn't have to be one of the 12 that you see on your screen. If it's something else entirely, feel free to share. All right, thanks, Rebecca. So disengaged employees and poor job performance. Melody has retiring expertise. Yep. Rhonda has on-the-job learning. Great. All right. Oh, okay. Yeah, right, Greg. So if the positions take a long time to learn, awesome. Culture. Thanks, Karen. So a frustration with the lack of advancement. So that might come under some of these categories, or it might combine them into a bigger issue. And complexity of projects, knowledge leaks, absolutely. So knowledge leaks and retiring expertise, for those of you who may not be, for whom that might not be clear, is when we've got people who are leaving the company and taking with them really important information. They might be retiring out. I've worked with organizations who have had it like entire, you know, it's sort of, there's lots of phrases for it that aren't necessarily complimentary, but when you have got a lot of, like, a group of senior leaders retiring all at once, then this creates a knowledge drain in the organization, or you might just be losing your best talent. All right, great. So these are some of the most common reasons that organizations cite for putting mentoring programs into place. The biggest problem is when we don't know why mentoring programs are being put into place. As I said, we don't want to be that solution that never had an identified problem. Thanks, David. So disengaged employees, attrition, shallow talent bench, poor performance, and culture. So a few things that mentoring programs might address for David's organization. All right, so align to a purpose starts with a very important step. One that, as far as I know, isn't really addressed with a lot of other frameworks, which is assessing the culture of the organization. This is so important for mentoring programs because, as I like to say, mentoring happens out there. Classroom training, virtual classrooms, e-learning, you control where that learning happens in a lot of cases. You know what that experience is going to look like. In a classroom, for example, you have a trained facilitator, someone who is an expert in assessing the room, reading what's needed, figuring out if they need to speed up or slow down, adjusting activities as they go, and then being able to kind of feed that back to the team of, here's how these workshops are going. But with mentoring relationships, it's happening out there in the world in one-on-one. Oh, hold on. I always forget to turn off my office phone during webinars. So it's happening out there. So we need to make sure that whatever this mentoring experience is going to be, it feels very cohesive with the culture that we're building. I'll give you a quick example of why this is so important. A couple of years ago, my team was building two mentoring programs concurrently. On the one hand, we were building a mentoring program for the U.S. Army Reserve Legal Command. So not just the military, but lawyers in the military. So how do you think we might describe the people participating in that mentoring program? You can use chat or you can speak up on the phone if you want. Yeah, exactly, Greg. So regimented is a good word for that. Concerned with detail, thanks, Karen. Hierarchy, exactly, Melody. Probably type A's, exactly. You think of, I mean, you have to assess the culture. There are going to be individuals who maybe not as hierarchical or concerned with that, but their entire careers as lawyers and as Army reservists, in the military, have sort of pointed them towards these rules and structure, and kind of being finding safety in those rules and structure. And so that we were building that mentoring program on the one side. On the other, we were building a mentoring program for a small Silicon Valley tech startup. And we were building this mentoring program for the sales team within this startup. Okay, so now give me some descriptor words for that program, for the sales team in a small Silicon Valley tech startup. Exactly, creative, extroverts, competitive, great word, Karen. Absolutely, pretty much the opposite of what you think of when you think of the USARLC, the other program. And so we were building these concurrently. And here's why assessing culture is so important. Yeah, definitely, you guys are on it. Melody and Karen, absolutely. So the tech startup, more about networking, more about being just more savvy with a lot of those relationship ideas. And then, in fact, they were a younger group than the group we were working with on the other side. So now here we had two groups. If we had just copied and pasted a mentoring program that we had done for someone else into these two groups, we'd run into a big problem. Because the USARLC, that military legal branch of the Army Reservists, needed a program that had a lot of checkboxes, a lot of structure, told them what to do, when to meet, how often to meet, for how long, what were you supposed to talk about, because that's where their comfort is. That's what their culture said. You know, the more details, the more I know what I'm supposed to do, the more we can kind of be comfortable in this relationship, and that's expected. But if I had taken that high compliance driven, like, checklist program and brought it over to that tech startup, they would have just it would have been an epic failure. This is a group of people who don't even have job titles. So this is why that culture piece has to be so important, because the mentoring experience for each individual in that mentoring program has to feel cohesive with the organization, with one exception. If the purpose of this mentoring program is to change the culture, then you might want to mix it up. But in almost every case outside of that, you want to make it feel cohesive. Okay, give me, like just a word or two in chat and let me know if you're following along. Sounds good and ready for the next concept here. All right, thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Melody. Thanks, Karen. Okay, cool. Thanks, David. All right, so first we assess culture. If you're internal, you might want to, you might still want to do this. You might think, well, I've got to get a good handle on my culture, but it never hurts to just take a few minutes and think it through. Then we're going to start thinking about the results we want from our mentoring program, understanding that mentoring can be a highly effective solution. This is a screenshot from a very closely held secret from ATD. This is from their research report they published in December. Special for you all, I'm not supposed to even have a digital copy of this. They only send out paper copies, true story. I don't know why. But they cited me all over the study, so I decided I could use their graph to share with you all. So one thing they found in this research study on mentoring last year is that of the organizations that responded to the survey, they found that 50% of organizations with formal mentoring programs saw higher employee engagement and retention. 46% saw growth of their high potential employees, which is a huge driver. 37% saw both the creation of more relationships and collaboration, so breaking down silos, and knowledge management and knowledge transfer. And then 34% saw the development of the learning culture, so like a more intentional or purposeful culture. So the reason I bring this up is because after you assess your culture, the next step is to identify the most critical talent needs of the organization. What are we trying to achieve? Is it one of these things? Is it those drivers we looked at earlier? Are we trying to improve engagement? Are we trying to improve retention? Are we trying to support the growth of high potential employees, or one of those other things you mentioned? And then we want to state the business case for the mentoring program. So this is kind of what it looks like. And here's our two cases, basically, that I talked about a minute ago. So for the U.S. Army Reserve Legal Command, their culture is hierarchical. There's a lot of red tape. It's sort of old school in nature, self-described. And the impact of that, we have to think about the impact. That means that program has to have a lot of buy-in and approval from the top. What you don't see on the slide, because I didn't want to cram it full of text, is also what we were talking about. It has to be very structured. It has to have very clear expectations and sort of a regimented approach. Now, once we assess the culture, we have to figure out what the most important talent needs are to address. And as you can see there, in that instance, they needed to get skills into their high potential employees so that they were ready to take on leadership positions in the future. And so we built the mentoring business case. Mentoring will create more capability in our emerging leaders, ... versus the second example with that tech startup whose culture is collaborative, innovative. It says shallow. I don't mean like shallow as in artificial, but shallow as in org chart. Like there's 2 levels in the entire organization. And so the impact of that is that the program has to be highly individualized. It has to feel very grassroots. It has to feel very high value. What they were trying to address is a dilution of culture due to a very quick growth. They actually, I think, tripled in size in 3 years or something. It was a crazy growth. And they're trying to, because of that, they have to recruit more people, and the mentoring program was intended to attract more better talent. So the business case for that program ended up being that mentoring will strengthen the culture during the period of hypergrowth and attract key talent. So this is all about aligning that program to a purpose. So why do you think it is so important to do this work? You all have history. You've taken classes, whether it comes from practical expertise and experience or from what you've learned. Why is it so important for us as architects of learning solutions to align the mentoring programs to a strategic organizational purpose like this? Make the business case. Why is this so important? You can answer in chat or by phone. Karen, that's a great aspect to it. So I would call that the individual aspect. People have to be motivated to do it. They need to know what's in it for me. So as you move down the line, you launch this program, you're trying to get people to participate as mentees, as mentors. You're trying to get the supervisors to agree to let people participate in this. They need to know the WIFM, absolutely. Also, Karen, it's tied to business results. That's right. Because at the end of the day, learning and development, talent development needs to be able to prove our value. And if we are tied, if this mentoring program is tied to the most critical talent needs of the organization, then we are safe. We are doing what we can to help our executives and our senior leaders sleep at night. We are doing our jobs when it's tied to the most critical talent needs and when we can state the value. And in Melody, so you can assess whether you're achieving the goals. Great point here as well. So in just a minute, we're going to look at why it's so important to start to assess what does success look like right from the beginning. Well, guess what? In these two programs, success looks like either creating more capability in our emerging leaders, or it looks like strengthening culture and attracting key talent. It's super clear how we're going to measure success here. Awesome. Thanks for that input. Yeah, you guys are right on point. So the deliverable of the Align to a Purpose component here is what I call the mentoring program purpose statement. It defines what mentoring looks like for an organization, and then shares all that alignment work, assessing the culture, establishing the most critical talent needs, and stating the business case. The purpose statement also includes two things, which I don't have time to go into too much tonight, but it's the success factors that come up during this discovery process, like Melody mentioned, and a very clear statement of benefits to the organization, mentors, and mentees. Now, I have an example I'm going to share with you, but there's a little asterisk to this example. It's a very short, a very simple example, primarily to just show you what I mean by some of these bullet points, and so that it fits on a slide. In reality, your mentoring program purpose statement might be a couple of paragraphs. It might be a couple pages. It all depends on the complexity of your situation. But here's just one example of a purpose statement. Our organization is a competitive, fast-paced sales company, and we have a gap in our leadership talent pool. Our bench strength is currently shallow due to year-over-year growth. The company has decided to make leadership development one of the top 3 initiatives for 2018. So this is the Align to a Purpose work. Why are we doing this? What is the most critical talent needs? Our mentoring program will help to attract and retain top talent and promote a diverse leadership talent pool. So that's a success statement there. That's something to help me measure success. Mentoring in our company is a performance-driven relationship between a more experienced employee and a less experienced one, built on mutual trust and respect. There is the definition of mentoring. What does mentoring look like at this company? It's right there in that sentence. Mentors involved in the program will have the opportunity to build relationships and gain exposure to our next generation of talent, and will also receive additional development to support their efforts. So this is the benefits to the mentors. This is overlooked in like 99% of cases that I see personally. We actually get brought in very often because mentors are neglected, and so we do a lot of mentor skills development. So this is a really key piece here. Learners or mentees will get the guidance and expertise they need to succeed in their development. That's the benefits to them. And the benefits to the organization. The mentoring program will help to accelerate the time frame needed for a manager to be prepared for leadership promotion and shorten time to success in their new role. All right, so align to a purpose. I wanted to spend a lot of time there because a lot of practitioners, when they're tasked with or come up with the idea of building a mentoring program, they dive right into what does it look like? When are we going to launch? How long is it going to go? And they ask these very sort of tactical questions. But if you skip this alignment work, this discovery work, you end up with a very short-lived flavor of the month kind of program. The program is just not set up for success. And so this alignment work is absolutely key to making sure that mentoring programs are both sustainable and scalable. So this is the biggest section I wanted to cover. I have the other sections ready to go, but before I move on, I would love to hear from anyone if they have any questions, reactions, observations.
Jen,
Mm-hmm.
what's the biggest misconception with mentoring?
With mentoring relationships or with mentoring programs?
Just mentoring programs in general.
I think the biggest thing I battle is the executive perspective on mentoring. So there have been so many bad mentoring programs out there, programs that have failed or just failed to get off the ground. And so a lot of my job is actually working with leaders to see that there's a lot of potential benefit and there's a lot of value to be gained as long as we do it the right way this time. I wrote an article for TD Magazine last year that I had to call my boss from like almost 10 years ago and say, hey, can I quote you in this article on executives? Because she was my sponsor and I was building a mentoring program. And I was actually in her office to match her up with someone. We were ready to launch the program and I was getting ready to match her as a mentor with a mentee. I sat down and she goes, okay, before we get started, I have to tell you, I don't really think mentoring programs work. So she was not only the program sponsor, but also set up to be a mentor in the program, and it just completely shook my world. So for me, that's the biggest hurdle.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. Okay, so the next one is design the experience. This is a component that we're probably a lot more comfortable in because this is more instructional design centric. There's a lot of different experience design decisions that go into a really great, robust mentoring program, but there are 5 basic key decisions that go into that. And the first is the structure of the program. What does the program even look like? So let's do this. In chat, give me a yes if you have been a part of a formal mentoring program, or a no if you have not. Okay. Mostly no's, 1 yes, and a sort of. All right. Okay. Great. Okay. Yeah, and Karen, so I'm not sure if this is what you intended with that, with the fact that it's onboarding, but we try and keep our definition of what a mentoring program entails as broad as we can, because some mentoring programs are what I call content focused, and some are what we call individual focused, and it's actually not an either or, it's a continuum. So onboarding programs tend to be content focused. Here's what you need to know about working with our company. Everything from how to file expense reports, to where the bathrooms are, to our org charts, to our core values, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the way on the other side of the spectrum is like, think executive coaching. There's no set content by any stretch. In fact, very often we have goals for the relationship, but individual conversations take different detours depending on what's going on with that individual's life at that moment. So thank you for that, Karen, because that gave me an opportunity to talk about it. So regardless of where your program might be on that spectrum, it needs a structure. Every program needs a structure, and there's lots of options, but the most common options are on the screen. So one is one-on-one. This is the most common. This is what we are all familiar with: one mentor and one mentee or learner. I go back and forth, by the way, because some people have very strong reactions to the word mentee. Remember, words are important. Language matters. I actually have a proposal out to a client who made me go through and write protege instead of anything else. So it's mentor and protege because they just couldn't stand the other words for it. So, I use them interchangeably. So one mentor and one mentee, that's a one-on-one or more traditional structure. Oh, Rhonda, you hate the word mentee, or you use them interchangeably? Use them interchangeably. Great. So there's also reverse mentoring, which has been defined in the past as a younger employee mentoring an older employee, usually for the purpose of either around mentoring or around diversity or technology. So traditionally that structure of reverse mentoring is a younger employee mentoring an older employee around technology or diversity. I personally have never built a reverse mentoring program because I feel like that's an HR nightmare, with a few exceptions, of very notable exceptions, like NASA has a very famous reverse mentoring program that was very successful and things like that. So I'm not against reverse mentoring programs. I just happen to think that they are actually just one-on-one programs. If you take out the age factor, you've got a person, regardless of how old they are, who wants to learn how to use social media, and they find a mentor, regardless of how old they are, who's great at social media, and then they can mentor them. That feels like a one-on-one without the HR nightmare to me. But it depends on, again, the culture, which is why we looked at that first. More recently, reverse mentoring has started to mean more sort of job title or level in the organization as opposed to actual chronological age, but it's still a little bit chaotic. One thing I like to tell everyone is my grandmother is turning 90 in a couple of months, and she uses social media more than me. So if someone were to ever tell her that she was going to get mentored by a younger person, she would laugh at them. So that's reverse. A third option is mentor-led groups. Very, very kind of clear and easy to guess. This is when you have a group of usually 4 to 6 people who are all working on the same learning goals, being mentored by a single mentor. This is a great way to spread out resources. We'll talk about that more in a second. And then peer groups are mentoring groups that don't have a designated mentor, who tend to be all working towards a similar goal, so they're kind of supporting each other around some goals. And then, of course, there's hybrid. Now, before we talk about hybrid structures, I want to talk a little bit about pluses and minuses. One-on-one and reverse mentoring relationships. By their very nature, by their definition, these are relationships that tend to have very focused, individualized attention, the opportunity to build a lot of trust and respect because of that sort of one-on-one connection and a lot of focus on an individual's needs. The mentor-led groups and the peer groups, of course, have the opposite of that, where there isn't as much focus on the individual needs. There is a risk of getting lost in more of a group dynamic. On the other hand, there's the opportunity to learn from a lot more people. And so it's a trade-off of which one is going to be more valuable and effective of a learning experience. The other things to keep in mind is that when you have mentors in your program, you need a certain amount of mentors or a mentor pool to accommodate each of these structures. Now let's imagine for a moment that you have 100 mentees in your mentoring program. 100 mentees, learners, proteges. How many mentors do you think you need to recruit for 100 mentees in a one-on-one mentoring program? What's your guess? Lots of great guesses. Greg is the closest. So 25, 50, 100, with 100 mentees, you actually want a goal of recruiting 150 mentors. Because imagine you're matching up these 100 mentees. So you find mentor number 1 to match with mentee number 1. And when you look at mentee number 2, you match them over here with this mentor. Well, if you only had 100 mentors, by the time you get to 98, 99, and 100, they're getting matched with whatever mentors are left. There's absolutely no rhyme or reason to it. They just kind of get stuck with whoever hasn't been matched. So in order to make those matches meaningful, you need to have a much bigger pool of mentors for a one-on-one program than mentees. So I like to say shoot for 150%. You're probably not always going to get that, but you at least can give yourself options. Good question, Rebecca. We're going to talk about matching in just a couple minutes, so hang on to that. So with one-on-one reverse, your mentor pool needs are very high. Obviously, with a more mentor-led group, your mentee or your mentor pool needs are much lower. So you can have one mentor to every group, right? So instead, with 100 mentees, let's say 4 people in a group, that's 25 relationships to find mentors for. So you're actually looking at closer to 40 mentors, much better than the 150 you need for the one-on-one. So the structure is determined both by the culture that you've already assessed, what's going to work best here. The U.S. Army Reserve Legal Command didn't have a lot of mentors to go around, but they were going to be most comfortable with that traditional one-on-one structure, no matter what else was that was kind of the overriding factor. That's why we assess the culture, so that we know how it impacts the rest of the program design. On the other hand, some of the other programs we've built, the executives really wanted to be highly involved, but you can't have an executive mentor 7 people. It just doesn't work. They wouldn't be able to get their job done, or they would do a bad job mentoring. So instead, we matched them up in mentor-led groups, which means that they were able to impact more people and create more value in more relationships and with a bigger audience. Now, so as I said, any decision you make is going to have risks and benefits. But one thing you can do, and this is something we do more often than not, is create a hybrid program, a hybrid structure. For example, we might use a group. Please ignore the labels. And when I brought these slides into this new deck, I think some of the labels got mixed up. So ignore the words and instead let's focus on the diagram. Let's say I start with a mentor-led group, meaning we have one mentor who's mentoring a group of 4 mentees. So that's the structure we're going to choose. We have our CEO who's mentoring 4 high potential employees. They get together once a month. So she gets to sort of be the mentor in that relationship. She gets to have impact. And then once a month, those mentees also meet one-on-one with mentors. So the executive gets to have a huge impact across the group. And that group also gets the benefit of that one-on-one individualized attention that a traditional one-on-one structure will bring. So this is a hybrid structure. Make sense? Give me a yes or no if that makes sense. Awesome. So we build these hybrid structures more often than not. Another example here is that same idea. The group, we have our CEO mentoring 4 mentees once per month, say the first week of every month. And then the third week of every month, that peer group, those 4 people they get together in a peer group to continue that learning, continue that conversation. But the executive isn't pulled into, 2 meetings a month and taking up twice as much of her time. So the first design decision is around structure. The second design decision is around schedule. Once we know what structure we're using, we need to know when it's going to happen. Is it always open, ongoing, the 7-Eleven of mentoring programs? My mentor runs the mentoring program for the Office of Naval Research. Their program is always open. It could be February 14th. It could be August 1st. It could be October 22nd. It doesn't matter. If I want to be a part of the mentoring program, I can go ahead and fill out whatever application and get matched up. I can also, on those dates, at any point, decide I no longer want to be part of the mentoring program. Ongoing programs are great. They're inclusive. They're supportive. However, ongoing programs don't have a predictable cycle of effort. And so you never know when you're going to need to spend time on that mentoring program. So ongoing programs require more administrative needs, more maintenance than other schedules. Calendar-based is exactly what it sounds like. It's probably more common. This is where we have a mentoring program that lasts 6 months and starts every February, or a mentoring program that lasts 18 months and it starts every other year in August. Whatever it might be, it's a very predictable pattern. We know when the ramp up time is, we know when the recruiting time is, we know when the communication time is, we know when the launch is, and so this administrative needs can be pre-planned so that the program leaders and program administrators can be available according to that predictable schedule. So again, ups and downs. On the good side, it's predictable. We can make sure that we have everything in place so that we are responsive to the needs of the people participating. Downside is, let's say our mentoring program lasts for 6 months and starts every February. What happens when someone wants to join it in April? We have to decide, are we letting them in or not, and what does that look like? And finally, there is kind of an other, which is something that's more programmatic. One example of this is a company that was revamping their mission, vision, and values for the whole company. They had acquired a bunch of companies over several years. The culture was just really changed and needed to be updated. So they are updating their mission, vision, and values. And so along with rolling out their new MVV, they rolled out a mentoring program with senior leaders to help get the messaging out about why this was so important. So first decision is structure, second decision is schedule. Third, as you asked about, is matching. Now, there are just as many options for matching as there are for the other decisions, but I tried to simplify it a little bit with some of the more straightforward options. Now, these are all options for manual matching, meaning that you or an administrator are going to actually match mentees and mentors and groups and what have you. First on the list, but last in preference, is random. So this really is when you're going, I don't know, I guess these two can go together and these two can go together and these two can go together. The only time when it's going to have to be a random or arbitrary match is when you really don't have any choice. In other words, when you've got 100 mentees and you've got 98 mentors, in order to make it as fair as possible, you kind of have to randomize those matches, because you can't use an effective matching process for some mentees and not for others. That's disparate impact. We don't want to get into that realm. So if your hands are kind of tied with your mentor pool, you're probably going to end up with a more sort of random matching process. One of the most common is role and location. Here's the example. I've got a new salesperson in Detroit who's going to be mentored by a senior salesperson in the Detroit office. Role plus location. I'm going around kind of clockwise here. Skills match is exactly what it sounds like. I'm working on presentation skills. There's a mentor who's really expert at presentation skills, and so we get matched together. Self-selected, super powerful. I looked at some of your questions, and I think this is what some of you were asking about. Whenever possible, this is a fantastic matching approach. Letting mentees self-select and ask mentors to be in a mentoring relationship. So this usually requires a good amount of work to make sure that everyone has bios or resumes or whatever it might be to say, here's all the mentors who are available. And so mentees can really reach out on their own, decide who might seem like a good match, and reach out on their own. The big benefit of this is that, man, you get to see those stridations in who's going to be hyper focused and take ownership of their learning and who you're going to have to be chasing over the course of that program. And the people who are proactive, and the minute they get that list, they start sorting through, and they go and they find someone and they ask them first. Well, then they get it, right? That, well, the mentor can decide, but they're usually going to decide to go after the person who's proactive. So you start to see results right away. Now, my word of caution on self-selection: make sure that if you're going to take this route, that you provide every mentee the same access to every mentor. What you don't want is to have some mentees getting access to better mentors just because their boss knows somebody. Again, this is going in the opposite direction that we want to go for most mentor program purposes. It's not going to help us with diversity and inclusion. It's not going to help us with retention. So make sure that everyone has the same access. And then SME rotation. This is where, for example, I built a program once for the Northeast region of a company, and it was for a leadership role. The leadership role that these mentees were moving into had 4 job quadrants. So all our job responsibilities fit into these 4 job quadrants, and we assigned a subject matter expert from the region who was like perfect, like just a rock star in each of these quadrants. And so over the course of the year, all mentees in that region would rotate through quarterly one of those 4 mentors. It's pretty cool. It was a great matching process. It worked out really well. Okay, so we've gone through 3 of the design decisions. What questions do you have so far? I'm going to go through the rest pretty fast because I think you guys are getting this. There haven't really been a lot of questions. So this would be topic driven. The earlier example. Karen, are you able to get on the phone line? If you're not, that's fine. I'm just, I want to make sure I'm answering your question. Mentees go out and mentor peers. Okay. Thanks, Karen.
Karen, this is Greg. It says you're self-muted. I am not muting you.
Well, Karen's, well, you're trying to, okay, all right, that's fine. We might be able to come back to it at the end of the time, Karen. So just to let everybody know, final cap on this, there are lots of platforms out there that do the matching for you. Particularly, I talked to an organization last week who's talking about 500 pairs of mentees and mentors. When you're getting into those kinds of numbers, of course, manual matching no longer makes sense. We have strategic partnerships with 3 of those technology platforms that do that work, but there are several of them out there. So just know that you don't always have to match everyone by hand. I'm not going to go over the next 2 slides, which are the next design decisions, because it'll take a while. But I am giving you these in the follow-up slides. The last 2 design decisions are what are the participation requirements for learners or mentees and for mentors. And these are the 3 E's. So how do these individuals get into the program? What's expected of them while they're in the program? And how might they exit the program? The idea here being not just like, oh, well, the program will end and that's how they leave the program. But what is going to come up that we can be proactive about instead of fighting fires? Like, well, what if someone just doesn't show up for their meetings? Are they going to get removed from the program? And what does that look like? So it's about being proactive about these entry expectations and exits and not reactive. You'll also have this, by the way, the deliverable for Aligned to a Purpose was the mentoring program purpose statement. The deliverable for the mentor or for the Design the Experience is a mentor program charter. This is it. I mean, there's a lot more to most of our charters, but if you want our secret sauce, this is what we build for our clients more often than not, are pretty extensive mentor program charters, which describes everything I've gone over with you tonight in detail. This is kind of a simple outline, but there you go. It's yours for the taking. Now, the rest of the components are pretty straightforward, and I am not going to spend time here because some of you asked some questions that I definitely want to get to. with our time together. You do have to figure out how you're going to launch this program. Is it going to be live? Or is it going to be virtual? Are you going to go big and tell everyone about it and have, you know, like hire a DJ? Or is it going to be more of a soft launch, more of a pilot, so you can kind of build this story of success and slowly scale it up? So again, this is a slide directly from the course I teach for ATD. And it will help you think through some of that. One of my favorite subjects when it comes to Axles and mentoring programs is this idea of evaluation. Because, Greg, you can disagree with me if you want, but I think we are notoriously terrible as an industry at measuring our value. I was fortunate enough to have Jim and Wendy Kirkpatrick contribute to both of my books and kind of be able to bend their ear a little bit about evaluation when it comes to mentoring in particular. And, you know, what we've talked about is it is a little bit of a different beast. So the Kirkpatricks very much focus on, you don't want to just kind of take a point in time measurement. It's like if you're cooking, it's like if you're baking bread and you wait until the timer goes off to even look at it. Well, your bread might be burnt. It might be undercooked. You don't know. If you haven't looked at it at all during that entire time, you don't really know what you're going to get. And by then it's too late to do anything about it, probably. And so the Kirkpatricks are very much focused on this idea that we can't just measure something at the end. And when it comes to mentoring programs, that's doubly true. You can't have a 6-month mentoring program and after everybody's done with their relationship say, how did it go? You can't do anything about it. And now everyone's wasted 6 months of time. And so when it comes to evaluation, the idea is about building an ongoing story of success and getting bad news early, basically. So I have a bunch, just a list of different things that you might measure in a mentoring program at each of the 4 levels. Now, I'm a Kirkpatrick loyalist, not really a Phillips loyalist, so I measure to level 4, not level 5. But if you're an evaluation guru, then you could probably figure out what level 5 measurements might be for mentoring. But above all else, if you're measuring level 4, or at least planning to measure level 4, you of course are measuring those things you identified in the Align to a Purpose component, the goal, the purpose of your program. And here's the trick, and I think this applies to all evaluation, all metrics. When you are trying to figure out, how do I evaluate the success of this mentoring program? I think the trick is really to plan backwards. You start with level 4 and you say, and you figure out, how am I going to measure level 4? And then you say, okay, if I'm going to measure results, strategic results, what behavior has to be in place in order to get those strategic results? And then what learning has to happen in order to enable that behavior? And what do I need to establish from a learning environment standpoint to get the right reactions to set up the learning? So in the slides, you will get this. It's like a very simple, explanation or example of planning backwards. I guess I should have checked in, Greg. I made an assumption here, but can everyone, let's do another 1 to 5 check-in. I'm talking about these different levels of Kirkpatrick, and I assume that everyone knows what those are, but I guess I shouldn't have assumed. So give me a 1 to 5 on your familiarity with the Kirkpatrick 4 levels of evaluation. 5 is you could recite them in your sleep. 1 is I haven't heard the name Kirkpatrick before tonight. Okay, awesome. Okay, good. At least everyone's familiar or more than familiar with those, so I didn't lose anyone along the way. So level 4 is results. What are the strategic results? What are we trying to achieve with this program? Let's say it's to build a talent pipeline. Okay. How do we measure that? Well, we might look at how many people applied to postings versus actually got hired. We might look at how many people we have hired externally over the last few years, and then see if that number goes down after the mentoring program has been in place for a year or two, right? So these are all different ways we can measure those level 4 results. And then, as I said, you work backwards, asking questions. Well, what behavior do we have to see? What performance do we have to see in order to get these results, to build this talent pipeline? Well, there are going to be specific tasks, specific performance, demonstrated competencies that are happening in the work environment that when those all happen, we know we will have a stronger talent pipeline. Great. How do we measure those competencies, that performance? Well, we might do manager ratings, 360s. We might look at performance reviews. Well, what learning needs to happen to see those competencies at work in the work environment? And then we figure out how to measure that. And then what expectations do we need to clarify? What obstacles do we need to remove in order for the learning to happen? Thanks, Karen. Okay, so reactions, questions. I just unloaded a few slides on evaluation, everyone's favorite topic here. I'm curious what's going on for you all. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions yet. If you are formulating your question or you're typing it, oh, thanks, Melody, awesome. Keep going if you also have questions, though. How do you get mentors to invest time to mentees? Great question, Melody. I think it's a little complicated because it depends on why they're not doing it. But some of the ways that we help, we have addressed that in the past. First of all, I think you need to be crystal clear about not only what mentoring looks like, so mentors know, like potential mentors often don't even know what good mentoring looks like. They haven't had a role model who has demonstrated this. And so if we say, hey, everyone, we've got a mentoring program coming out, who wants to be a mentor? But we don't bother to clarify what expectations are. We don't clarify how much time is needed. We don't set expectations of what they actually need to do as a mentor or what good looks like. How could we possibly expect them to sign up for that? It's like saying, hey, I've got a vehicle under this cover over here. I know you can't see what it is, but do you want to drive it? It's like, there's no way that we're going to get the reaction we want from that. So definitely, first of all, is clarifying those expectations, being as crystal clear as possible. What does mentoring look like here? What is a good mentor going to do? How much time do you need to invest? All of that. I think the other part of it is being super clear about what benefits they will get as a result. Being clear that, hey, this is not just about you giving of your time to develop others. We fully expect that as a mentor, you will also learn new things. You will get insight into talent in other areas of the organization. We guarantee that if you are showing up for these meetings and you're having these conversations, you will find a whole new perspective on the work that we do as an organization, right? What are the benefits to mentors? Awesome, Melody. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem, right? So we keep asking people to be mentors, but we don't always give them a good idea of what that means. Thank you for the question. I really appreciate that. Well, everyone, you don't have to wait for me to ask for questions. If you have any questions coming up, please feel free to post them in there. I do have all of the questions that Greg sent me coming up in a few slides here. So if you're just waiting for those, we'll get there in a few minutes. The last component of Axles is about supporting participants. Just like the alignment work is very rarely done, the other part that's very rarely done is thinking about how to support participants. To use a broad sweeping generalization here, when an ISD is told to build a mentoring program, when they've never done it before and don't have any sort of specific expertise in this, the first thing they do is figure out what the launch looks like. Oh, well, we're going to have an event and we're going to bring people together and we're going to give them all t-shirts and, you know, and we're going to have speed mentoring, speed dating. And that's all well and good, but if you skip the align phase, the program is inevitably going to crumble. And if you don't have any plan for what happens after that launch, the program is also going to fail. So I really believe that one of the best things you could do to prevent that from happening is to support your participants. Help your mentors with really specific mentoring skills like active listening, diagnosing what's going on, giving critical feedback, dealing with ambiguity. These are skills that mentors need, and oh, hey, it doesn't hurt that these also are skills that effective leaders need as well. So when we work with organizations, we have workshops that we call Mentor's Journey. We have an e-course, we have toolkits and things like that. These are all around these types of skills. And so we talk to organizations and say, it's not just beneficial to have mentors who are really skilled and competent as mentors, but these are things that will help them in other areas of their career as leaders as well. So to prepare our mentors, we want to communicate with them frequently. Out of sight, out of mind is definitely a thing when it comes to mentoring. If mentors and mentees don't hear from you, being program administrators or leaders, if they don't hear from the program for a couple of months, guess what? You're starting to lose people. So you have to have a plan. When are we going to communicate with them? How are we going to communicate with them? What will be most helpful for them to hear during those communications? Continue to set those clear expectations. Provide resources to help them with their skills as a mentor or with learning agility for mentees, resources to help facilitate further conversations. Like, we know a lot of you are working on, I'm looking at my bookshelf here. We know a lot of you are working on presentation skills, so here's a book by Nancy Duarte, right? So relevant resources for both sort of that meta level of being great at the role, but also that results level around content. And then opportunities for practice and building community. So that was kind of my that was my one-day course boiled down into, I think I came in under an hour and a half. I have all of your questions lined up, but again, feel free to put them into to chat here, and I'll answer them as they come in. Karen, former perception of mentoring, mostly career advancement, focused on the mentee. But the example earlier was one mentor to one mentee, and the mentees go out and mentor. Yeah, okay. So so Karen, there is like this, like, everyone teach one kind of idea that works really well. This has become increasing in popularity, where kind of a requirement of being a part of a mentoring program as a mentee, no matter what the structure is, one-on-one or group. If you are joining the program as a mentee, the expectation is that after 1 or 2 program cycles, you will turn around then and rejoin as a mentor. And sort of continue that legacy. That is fantastic. It's a great way to make sure that you're going to have a mentor pool moving forward. The upside is that people tend to get really excited about that idea that they're going to learn and then they're going to be able to teach others. The downside is that when you open the floodgates to anyone being a mentor, there's even more pressure to make sure that you are supporting them and getting them the skills they need, because 100% of your mentors will not have the skills they need to be good mentors. You will need to do more work to get them there. Rhonda, would you recommend using mentoring as a succession planning tool to gather knowledge, experience from senior level leadership? Absolutely. I would use mentoring in that context in combination with another learning solution. So when you can tie mentoring to something else like job rotation or stretch assignments, I think it works better in that case. But mentoring is a way for senior leaders to say, okay, here's my dedicated time to share my unique perspective, my unique experience of my story with emerging leaders. And and vice versa, for those emerging leaders to feel like, okay, this is my approved time to ask questions and be vulnerable, and so it almost gives permission for that learning to happen. But again, I would combine it with something else. Great question, thanks. Okay, Greg, is it okay if I go into some of the questions you shared with me now?
Absolutely, yes, sure.
All right. And some of these I probably mentioned, but what specifically prompted you to develop the Axles model? As I mentioned, the Axles model came out of, like, the best things come out of an area of need. Seeing that we didn't have, or seeing that the old frameworks didn't work for relationship-based learning prompted me to create something new. I wish I could say it was some like labor-intensive process of like, what would be the perfect acronym? I'm just not that tenacious. So Axles was, it came out of seeing the work that we actually did that was successful, and it was a kind of a natural fit. First steps in developing a mentoring program. I hope you feel like that question is answered, but it's to build out each of these components. Does, align to a purpose, design the experience, etc. By the way, if I answer these questions and you feel like I didn't answer a question well enough, please send me a chat and ask me to clarify something more. Some people think mentoring and coaching have the same meaning. I think I did cover that one pretty well, but again, if you don't think so or need to clarify something, ask me in chat. How long do you generally stay involved in a mentoring program that you have helped to get rolling? That's a complicated question, unfortunately, because I run a consulting firm and a consulting practice that, there's kind of that old Standby ISD joke that, or not funny joke, that your bosses, your senior leaders, when you're internal, don't want to pay you to do an analysis or an evaluation. They just want you to do the work, so to speak. The same is true when you're consulting. So there have been programs we have had the privilege and pleasure of maintaining, which is wonderful because then we get to iterate them and improve them as that goes on. But more often than not, we have to do a handoff and a transition to the client because they're not really interested in paying an external partner to continue the maintenance and leadership of that program. But we love it when we get the opportunity to do it. The other part of that question, it may not be specific to me or my firm. How long does an administrator need to be involved in the program? Forever. There are no mentoring programs that are successful that do not require handholding. There's no autopilot going on. Let's see. Ever seen an organization that wasn't capable of sustaining a mentoring program because of attitudes, behaviors, or overall toxic culture? No, but I have seen organizations not put the right effort or right investment into a mentoring program, so the mentoring program failed. So toxic culture, wrong, kind of unhealthy attitudes or behaviors, and then they're like, well, just put a mentoring program on it and, call me in the morning. And there wasn't the right investment there, and the right things weren't done to build a mentoring program to fix these things. It wasn't aligned correctly, and then they failed. So I'm sure there are impossible organizations that just meant nothing will help them, but I also believe that mentoring programs can be the most powerful tool in a talent management tool set. I truly believe that. I mean, I have to because that's what I do every day. But so far, I haven't met an organization that couldn't benefit from mentoring if it was done the right way. Reticent about seeking a mentor because I feel uncomfortable asking for someone's time and effort. Can you share how mentoring might benefit the mentor, especially where there's no formal mentoring program? So, an informal mentoring relationship. We know for a fact, and I don't have any stats in my back pocket, but we know that mentors see tangible benefit from from putting on that role, for taking on the role of mentor. Some of those things I mentioned earlier, as far as they themselves learn and grow as a result. I mean, you've probably heard that phrase, like, if you really want to learn something, then teach someone else how to do it, because someone else is going to break it in a way that you never even thought of before, and then you have to get really creative and know it at such a deep level to teach them that. So in that way, you know, there's a real tangible learning. There's so many things that go in. So when I mentor others, there's an accountability. Like I like to say, facilitators are the worst workshop participants, right? Because I'm unruly, I'm impatient, I don't like to sit down all the time. So when I'm mentoring someone else, it makes me pay more attention to, am I doing the things that I preach every day? So there's lots of benefits there, and I hope you've gotten an answer. Whoever asked that question, I hope you've gotten an answer to that. An ideal time frame to offer a mentoring program: 6 months after hiring, after 1 year, when a problem arises. There's no ideal time frame. It depends on what your most critical talent needs are. So if you are seeing a high level of attrition in your organization after 6 months, the ideal time to start a mentoring program is when they're onboarding and for the first 6 months. In my organization now, I presented the idea of taking individuals with a non-corporate background and developing them into a corporate professional, give them resources they need to grow within an organization, and prepare them for interviews and professional conversations. Would this be something to develop into a mentoring program? I think that's a perfect mentoring program. I think this one sounds like a content-driven program, so I think you would want something a little bit more structured, but it's hard for me to say without knowing about the organization itself. It does sound like a great mentoring program, potentially, though. I recommended starting a job shadowing practice for new staff members, which was successful. Perhaps establishing a peer mentoring program that would pair new staff to current staff. Would you recommend this? Would you recommend this type of formal established mentoring program for new staff, and how do I get senior leadership to buy in? So yes, that sounds like a great opportunity. I would also really consider that, you know, get one, teach one kind of thing, where if you, when you're new and you are in this mentoring program, and then you kind of graduate from this mentoring program, you're going to be expected, you know, within the next year or something to also mentor someone else who is new and upcoming. And then how do you get senior leadership to buy in? That's the big question, right? So how do we get executives and senior leaders to understand that this is valuable practice? Well, there are statistics, there are measurements out there that say that mentoring programs can do things like increase engagement by 20%, reduce costs by 20%. Like there's so many great stats out there. But at the end of the day, the answer is, because it's aligned to the most critical talent needs in the organization, we're solving your problems. You really want this to move forward. Do you feel that most employees are open to being mentored? Yes, 100%. I can think of like 2 people in almost 20 years of doing this that have said, I feel pretty good. I feel like I know everything I need to know. I don't really need a mentor. Other than that, I've never really encountered anyone who's like, no thanks, I don't want to learn anything. But that's only my experience. I don't have any research to back that up. What has been your most challenging experience in matching a mentor or trainee? I was building a mentoring program for 125 high potential leaders, and I had about 135 mentors. So when I say you want 150%, like you want 150 mentors to 100 mentees, it comes from experience of having to deal with that. So I had like not enough mentors basically, and it took me a full week of spreadsheet wrangling to do the matching process, because I would get like 3/4 through and then realize that, oh wait, Jill should be matched with Sandra, but Sandra was already matched with Ted, and then I have to rematch Ted to somebody else, and it was like this domino effect. So it took me a full week to match them. That was the worst. Do you look at personality factors in matching, or is it more duties? So we covered different ways, different reasons, or excuse me, different methods for matching. It depends on your purpose. So if it's a leadership development mentoring program, if it's a job performance thing, if you're trying to get your accounts payable folks to have better business acumen, then it's skills. So this is why we follow the Axel's framework, because each step informs the next step. How do we match them is really clear if you've already decided, if you've already aligned to the purpose of it. However, there's a kind of a part of this question is, what about communication styles? What about diversity, right? So one of the most common questions I get is, well, should I be matching women with other women mentors? And should I be matching people of color with leaders from who are people of color as well, and things like that? There are very mixed signals on that. I say there are lots of exceptions, but as a general rule, I say no. There's kind of this issue, this impact of following that, like, well, we're going to match type A personalities, or if you're familiar with DISC, like high I's with high I's. So we're going to match like with like. The problem with that, whether you're talking about communication preference, gender, ethnicity, like any of that, is that you create closed loops. And you not only rob the mentees of the experience of hearing alternate perspectives and opening up their networks, but you rob the mentors of the same thing. And so, again, there's lots of ways that I would contradict myself depending on the circumstances of the organization, but for the most part, I'm going to say you don't want to match like with like. I'm not sure if that was underlying that question or not, but it's a hot topic right now. Oh, thanks, Rhonda. I see your comment now. I'm sorry if I missed that earlier. Okay, do you think the mentee should always choose who to approach for mentorship? I think we covered that. Like, if you're using self-selection, great, but just make sure they have what they need, so that no one is, like, you just don't want an old boys club, right? You don't want this perpetuating exclusive situation. Okay, leadership skills, communication, feedback, integrity. Seasoned managers felt they had already had the same content several times, packaged different ways. Employees needed it earlier. Yeah, I mean, that is content-driven mentoring, and it's a great opportunity. I think those skills, I mean, don't get me wrong, I have earned a fair amount of my salary over the years as an instructional designer building workshops around leadership skills. So I still think it's one of the best ways for people to acquire those skills. And I also think we have so many tools at our disposal for driving that content. Currently, right now, on my boards, we've got mentoring programs that are content driven. We've got micro-learning resource libraries. We've got an e-course. I mean, we have so many tools at our disposal. I say yes, use them. I think this might even be the last one. Oh yeah, this is the last few questions. So if you have any others, please make sure you have those queued up. What incentives do you generally use to entice talented employees to participate? I think I covered this from a mentor standpoint. You need to be clear about expectations, make sure they know that they are capable of participating, and also that they know what benefits there are to them. We've never really, not never, but it is rare to have a problem recruiting mentees or learners. How do you convince employees to be mentors? So same kind of question. Do you meet resistance because they lack confidence? Yeah, so there's the two biggest, or too much time. Yeah, those are the two biggest objections. Well, I'm not sure I have anything to give back, or I'm not sure I'd be a good mentor, the confidence issue, and it takes too much time. So the too much time thing is, we expect it to take 3 hours a month, or we expect it to take X amount of time. And maybe it is too much time, but at least they can decide based on reality. But as far as confidence goes, that's why we as a team, my company focuses so much on mentor skills workshops and resources, so that we can say, hey, if you're not quite sure about putting this, taking on this role, don't worry. We're going to get you the skills you need. We're going to give you the tools you need to be successful. And our last question that I have, at least so far, is advice for mentors that are starting out. I find that sometimes I'm too honest. Tips and tricks on how to dial that back. There is a fantastic book called The Coaching Habit. It's by Box of Crayons founder Michael Bungay-Stanier, and I will put it in chat. Greg, have you used this book at all in the program?
I know of it, but I'm not aware of anyone using it.
It's phenomenal, and I'm biased. I'm a little biased because Michael is a colleague, but it is not only one of the best books I've ever read anywhere near this topic, but he's also one of the best. He's got the best learning program I've ever attended. So when Michael speaks at conferences, just to give you guys a sense of this, his whole thing is simplicity and elegance. So I've seen him speak, and he doesn't use slides. He gets up with a flip chart, and he'll write one big number on the flip chart, and then he'll turn the page and he'll write another big number. And after an hour, he's written 5 numbers on flip charts, but you walk out of the room feeling like everything has changed. So he's just brilliant anyway. But his book it's a plain read. It's super small and to the point and very easy. So in The Coaching Habit, he talks about taming your advice monster. And it's this whole idea of we want to share what we know. We want to give feedback. We want to say, no, don't do it that way. Or, oh, I would do it this way. And so that's, I'm biased. So I like our programs that we offer around mentor skills and how to be a great mentor. But aside from that book is probably your best solution. Well, Greg, that is all the questions and all the content I had kind of piled up, and I haven't seen anything else come through.
Thank you, Jen. That was great. Are there any final questions? I think Jen was pretty comprehensive. Oh, somebody ordered the book already through the county library. How about that? All right, folks, I'm not hearing or seeing any additional questions. I'll make the recording available to folks. Jen has graciously agreed to offer her slides in the form of a PDF file, so I will make that available as well. Jen, thank you once again, and I'm seeing a lot of good accolades come in through the chat here.
Yeah, thank you. My email address, our email address is on the PDF, but it's in chat as well. So if anyone does think of any questions you want to ask, feel free to reach out. I appreciate the invite, Greg.